Welcome back to The Chosen Life. I'm your host, The Chosen Lawyer, and very honored today to have a very special guest, the one, the only George Hill. George, welcome to The Chosen Life.
Thank you, Mr. Chosen Lawyer. I appreciate you inviting me on the show. I look forward to us having a very fruitful and fun conversation.
I got to tell you, this is a big honor because I've had quite a few celebrities on this show already. And as far as having just taped James Hinchcliffe, race car driver, Buff Bagwell wrestler, Steve Carsey with our documentary series, have not had an NBA star yet. And to have somebody with the career that you've had so far, finished last season with the Bucks, played with Giannis, Lebron, haven't won the ring yet, as far as I know, buddy, you've done it all in the NBA world.
It's not me, buddy. That's the wrong George Hill.
Wow, this is rather embarrassing.
I think you need to go back and look at Wikipedia or something.
I gotta say, because you're stylish, you're in great shape, you look like you're ready to run up and down the court. So wait a minute, I mixed up George Hill, NBA star, with George Hill, automotive and real estate mogul.
That's right. That's right. Mogul, I wouldn't necessarily say, but you know what? If you want to stretch that term, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so tongue in cheek, folks, I do actually know which George Hill this is, although I do get on him quite a bit about the similarities in name. How often do people bring up George Hill, NBA star, with you?
Every once in a while. Every once in a while. Obviously, the person's going to have to know a little bit about basketball. And I always say, you know what? I just wish I had his bank account. It's the best response.
He wishes he had your hair, your beard, and your good looks, man.
Well, maybe. We'll give me that one.
Have you ever been in a restaurant or at some kind of convention and anybody looked at your ID and mistaken you at all?
No, certainly not. I got mistaken for one of the guys on the Shaws of Sunset the other day when I was in Tampa, but it wasn't me there either.
So we did not meet at an NBA game. So George Hill, for all you know, is one of my best friends. We share common loves in many ventures as far as nutrition, fitness, real estate, cars. But George, why don't you first tell people the story of how we met? Because you'll be better telling that story.
Sure. Well, actually, it's two instances really how we met. So you were the opposing lawyer for a real estate transaction that we were selling as part of our Real Estate Rangers venture, and we were having a few issues with our lawyer at the time, and Eddie and myself were pretty impressed with how everything was going down. So subsequent to that, we were starting to look for someone. So knowing that went that well, we're like, hey, you know what? Let's keep this guy in mind for the future. After that happened, my wife was looking to set up a business, and I got onto a phone call with Nasir Manji, who is a real estate agent, because we were dealing with another transaction.
Great realtor in the Mississauga, Ontario area, folks.
Absolutely. Yes. Known him for a long, long time. He's been in the business for many, many years. And he suggested, hey, Jonathan, did you remember the guy? I'm like, yeah, we certainly remember him. So I picked up the phone. I called, I left a message for Jonathan. I got a phone call after that. And then I think we spent probably at least 2 hours on the phone just talking about everything under the sun, and cars and business and how to set it up, and corporations and taxation. And we just decided at that point that we're going to switch all of our portfolio of stuff to you. And everything went smoothly with my wife's business transaction, closing, selling, everything. And we've continued to maintain a relationship thereafter. We won't tell them about you and me going on vacation, but that's another story.
No, that's another.
That's a completely other. That's another podcast.
No, this is a PG rated podcast, so we're not going to go there. But Eddie, being Eddie B, your friend, brother, business partner as well. Yep. You're forgetting one telephone conversation that I'll never forget. When that transaction completed, you did call me with Eddie right at the conclusion of the transaction.
Yeah. Yes, we did.
And you said, we enjoyed working with you. Would it be okay if we hire you and you be on our side and work together on future transactions?
Correct. 100%. 100%.
One of the greatest phone calls I've ever had in my life. And I said to you, yes, we can.
Good. And you know what? We're happy. And as you know, subsequently, we've done further business. I bought some more stuff I've set up some corporations for some holding companies that I needed in the automotive business, and you've been a great support to us. So I always will refer people to you, my staff, my friends, in the event that they need any sort of legal advice, and I always look forward to us working together.
Well, it's very much appreciated. It's amazing when people touch your lives, you come together, and it's amazing how you come together. You know, the universe kind of does its thing and its magic. But I got to tell you that as we started working together, myself as a chosen lawyer, I was not the chosen lawyer at the time. I was going to be future, but at the time as Jonathan and yourself and Eddie, and we started having this relationship. And I thought, you know what, these guys are pretty cool, and I like speaking with them. I said to you guys, you know what, let's go for dinner one night. Let's get to know each other face to face, because we've been doing a lot of business together, and I'd like to be able to put properly a face to the name, because, you know, so much stuff you're doing always virtually, even back then, you know, it's a number of years ago. And that dinner was a changing point, I think, in my life for sure. I just remember sitting down with you guys, and one of my first impressions was, these guys get it. You know, they just get it. You meet people that you can either feel like you've talked to them and you've known them your whole life, or you have nothing, not two words to say to them. And I got to tell you, both you and Eddie changed my life that night.
Well, I'm glad that we had some impact, because you definitely did as well too. I agree with you. We talked about a lot of positive things, and you know, unfortunately, in this world, there's a lot of negativity with many things. When you think back about it, I was actually watching something yesterday, and it was a professor giving a talk about negativity and how the human being is preconditioned to be negative because of the fact of caveman days. And you know, you roll back your stone and you walk out and you take a look and you're wondering if a saber-toothed tiger is going to kill you, or if you're going to get stomped on by some sort of woolly mammoth. And it's very interesting, because human beings definitely are semi-programmed to be that way. It's the one thing that your brain can kind of automatically go to, where you get anxious and you worry. And you know, it was one thing that we definitely, yourself, Eddie, and myself, had that common ground, where we always try to be as positive as possible, no matter what was going on. Because, you know, we had a conversation that night at dinner where you were having a few health problems, right? But the way that you approached it, was different than most people who will complain about it. You're like, well, you know, it's a good thing that it happened, and everything is good now. Not everybody approaches that way, so that's why we get along so well.
Well, I remember very distinctly you guys inspiring me to say something, and it stayed with me since. And it was the idea of watching you in action. The three of us came from our own different worlds, you know, and our own experiences, everything else, fell down on the ground, face down, getting up, brushing ourselves off, and keep going and keep going. And I said to you at some point, you know, I feel like we need to start an organization, and we're going to call it the 2% Club. And we're going to have our little pins, and it's going to say 2% on the pin. And you're going to bring together everybody in this 2% club that fits the 2% club. And when people come up to you and just tell you, what does that mean, 2%? And the response is, if you don't know what a 2%er is, you ain't.
Listen, the reality is that you're a 1%er. Let's call it exactly what it is. You're definitely a 1%er in my eyes.
I gotta tell you, listen, it's just because I'm wearing the millions.co. That's millions.co shirt. This is part of my branding. They put together merchandising for athletes, and through my fitness and bodybuilding career, people can go on and type in Chosen Lawyer and purchase their very own Chosen Lawyer, Chosen Life podcast merch. But just because I have a merch line does not make me a 1%er, my friend. Because to me, 1%er is the Queen of England, Mick Jagger, P. Diddy. That's a 1%er. The spread between 1% to 2% is very, very, very big. And then it seems like 2 to 5%, and then everybody else from the 5% on. But also, what the measure of a 2% is very, very subjective. Is it about education? Is it about income? Is it about net worth? Is it about prestige? Is it all the above? I don't have that kind of answer. I just know I think it's a great idea.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that one.
Yes.
However, maybe you have a 1%er attitude.
You know what? It's if you only have two attitudes in my mind, you're either a wolf or you're a sheep. And you're either going to always be out for the hunt, so to speak, and be hungry and be ready to be your own leader, or you're ready to follow the pack with your head down. And that's fine too. You know, you're going to be one or the other generally. And as long as there's breath in my body, in my mind, it's wolf mentality.
I love it. Wolf pack.
The wolf pack. That's maybe where WCW got it from.
That's right.
So as we got to know each other, it's interesting again because we're talking about our journeys and where we all come to be. We come together and then our lives go in a direction, you know? And as I said, when I met you and I met Eddie, my life only felt better, took off, so to speak. You guys, when I look at you, George, you know, we roomed together, we're on vacation. I see the best version of me. I see what I strive to be. I strive to be good looking, groomed, stylish, speak well, entrepreneur, and quote unquote do something with my life. And I always was quite marveling as I've learned bits and pieces as to what is the George Hill story. So, sitting where you are today, my friend, how did you get to where you are today?
So let me chat a little bit about that. So you know that I wasn't born in Canada. I was born in the small island of Barbados, and I lived there till I was about 14 years old. And my parents decided that they wanted to have a better life for us. Even though, don't get me wrong, the life is great there. So big up to any of my Barbadian people that are online. That would be amazing if you guys are watching.
Love
Uh,
love your place. It's just awesome weather, awesome people.
yes. Now, if I was to speak the dialect to you, nobody would really understand. So I'll try and stay with this tone now. But we ended up moving here when I was about 14, 15 years old. And my sister, myself, my family, everybody relocated here. I had a brother who was Down syndrome, and he moved with us as well. And Canada afforded him very many, let's say, opportunities as well, because you don't normally have those opportunities in the Caribbean. And it worked out wonderfully for him. So even at the time when he moved, he was, you know, in his 40s. He was able to shine here as well. And I think that, you know, my sister and myself were able to shine here. We took a lot of the base that we had there and transferred it here. But I do have to say that a lot of it wouldn't have come, and I would not have been able to do as well if I didn't have people in my life like my brother or my parents, um, because they're the ones that really taught me how to work hard and to try and find direction. Because ultimately, sometimes in life, you need a change to be able to get you to go where you're going. And if I probably remained in Barbados, I would not have done as well, because I would not have had the direction or the motivation to move forward, because life there is a fair bit easier in terms of, you know, the nice beach and surfing and all those sorts of things around there. So that was a big part of me getting along my way moving here. I ended up getting a co-op position years ago through one of my aunts, and I was hired at BMO as a weekend supervisor for one of their call centers. And throughout that time, I grew while going to school within the call center. So I moved into different departments and ended up running and closing a department when I was 18. I was one of the youngest team managers ever. And my job was to transfer people to a new department and close down the old department while merging all the technology that was available to the two departments. So I learned a lot doing that. I was very fortunate in the respect that I had a manager who really liked me, and she gave me 30 hours a week to work, which if I was going to school and I did a full course load and I got 70% or more, at the end of the year, I got to claim back my books and my tuition from the bank. It was a different thing to what it was here. So I was a very fortunate person that, although I was still working and I worked hard because I was doing, you know, full course load and working 30 hours a week, I was still able to get the majority of my tuition paid for. So subsequently, it put me in a better frame coming out of university with no debt, right?
Smart
So
strategy.
after that, full-time job, started working for the bank. You know, obviously it's something where you feel obligated to give them your time back because they were good to me. So I ended up staying there for another 5-6 years. And during that time, I ended up learning a little bit about real estate. I was reading books about real estate. I ran a department there. I was a team manager for a department of about 22 people. And I ran that department, started buying properties. So I bought a small property in Don Mills that I went in, renovated. It was in really bad shape, rented it out for a few years, ended up selling it eventually. But during that time, when I was doing that, I met Eddie. So seeing Eddie, he was on the same floor as me, but it was through another mutual friend that we were looking at tax foreclosed properties because it was something I was trying to get into. And Eddie was a third partner that was brought in on this deal, but I never met him before. So I go into the washroom. I don't know if Eddie told you the story, but I go into the washroom and we met each other in the washroom. So he tells you a different story to how I tell it because his gets all dirty and stuff.
Some
But
some of my best meetings were meeting in the bathroom. I
right.
understand.
So we stood up for like another 20 minutes, just chatting in the washroom, right by like the door. And this is how him and I started on the whole real estate venture. So
How long ago was this, by the way?
this was 23 years ago.
I heard that's how Wozniak and Jobs met originally, in the high school bathroom.
So we started buying properties, him and myself, going in, fixing them up, and then we started learning things. So we went to different courses that were run through some of the real estate associations out there, and we flew up to Alberta. We learned about valuing properties and how to force appreciate. And then we started to take that and turn it into things. So we'd buy a property and then we started involving investors. And this is how we've grown to how we've grown. And this is, part of the reason how we met you. But during that time, I decided that I was going to leave the bank. So the bank had turned into Moneris, and I decided I was going to leave. And I did some consulting for about 18 months with the government. And as you realize, when you consult, the government contracts sometimes can be spotty. So there were times in between where you wouldn't have a contract, you pick up another contract for 3 months, then you wouldn't have a contract, then you pick up another contract. So it was pretty interesting stuff, the way that you'd have to really keep an eye on marketing yourself and making sure you continue to get jobs. So there was one point where they were taking just a really long time for this project that I was working on to have a second phase starting. They just kept delaying it. It was supposed to be a 4-year commitment. So I was getting a little frustrated after 3-4 months that I didn't have work. And I was up for this position, and my brother-in-law, who I ended up working with, kept calling me saying, "Listen, you're not working. Why don't you come and sell cars with me? Why don't you come sell cars?" I'm like, dude, there's no way I'm going to sell cars, right? So I was like, you know what? Listen, I'm up for this position. If I don't get it, I will come and work at Chrysler with you. And he's like, okay, fair enough, because literally he was calling me every single day. Right. So I just didn't shut him up.
And why you at this point? Like, why did he pick you?
Right. He just kept saying to me, listen, I think you'd be really good at it.
Interesting.
So I'm like, listen, I've never sold anything in my life. I don't know if I'm going to be good at it. Yes, I can speak to people well. Yes, I'm professional, but I don't know if I'm going to do well at it. So anyway, I ended up not getting the job that I was supposed to get. So I pick up the phone the next morning and I call him. And I said, you know what? I'm a man of my word. I didn't get the job. So I'll come down and I'll meet you at the dealership that you're at. He was at one of the Chrysler dealerships here in Mississauga.
Okay.
And I will start working with you. So he said to me, you know what? My dad's friend just bought a Ford dealership and he needs some good people there. Why don't you go see him? I'll get an interview set up for you and I'll get you in there. So I'm like, okay, fair enough. So I went in, I met the guy at the time, the owner, who's not the owner now. But he said to me, when can you start? Tomorrow? I'm like, well, how about Monday? So I started. Didn't really know much about the car business. Of course, I loved cars and I knew about engines and I knew about horsepower and all this sort of stuff. And he's like, okay, I want to get you on the sales team. So I started working. Anyway, by the second month, I was a top sales guy here.
Never done it before in your life.
Never done it before. So my second month in the car business, I delivered 21 cars. My third month was 24 cars. And it was something that I just put my head down because I needed to make money.
Yes.
And I wanted to do well at something. I always say, if you're going to do something, do it with your full ass, not half of it. Mm-hmm. So I put all my energy into it to learn it as quickly as possible. When you look at guys like Tony Robbins, he talks about accelerated learning. So if you want to be a good speech writer, write 1,000 speeches rather than spending 1,000 hours on it. Write 1,000 speeches and practice your way out of it. This is kind of what I did. I accelerated my learning. I'd listen to a lot of the veteran guys and what they would say and how they would approach things. And I developed a process in which I would sell vehicles to people and making sure that they were well informed and there was full transparency. And it worked for me. So within 8 months, I was approached by the owner and he said, hey, I got a chance to look at your resume that I didn't look at before. And I realized you did some process improvement when you worked at the bank. He's like, can you help me rebuild the processes for a couple of the departments here in the dealership? So I said to him, sure. So I started working on it. And then I took him to this training that we were going to. And the trainer at the place said, listen, if you really want to affect change, you need to give the person authority that's making all these changes. So we went out for lunch halfway through the course, and he sat down and he said to me, effective immediately, you're a sales manager. So I'm talking 9, 10 months in the business, and I became a sales manager already. And I had already sold quite a few vehicles within my first time here. And I did that for another 12 years as a sales manager. And we became, one of the top selling dealerships in Ontario. We had #1 customer service for a very, very long time. And then in November of 2017, the general manager left and I became the general manager.
And that's Erinwood Ford.
At Erinwood
on
Ford,
your shirt.
yeah, at Erinwood Ford. So it's been now almost 5 years as general manager. We've done quite a few things since I became general manager. We made a lot of changes around here in terms of personnel and adding departments. And a couple notable things that we did was we set up an export division. So we actually have a wholesale US dealership to be able to offer customers more money for their trades and expand our network outside of Ontario and outside of Canada. And recently we just purchased Direct Nissan last year as another acquisition under the Raymond Auto Group. And it was something that I had a big part in terms of looking at the metrics and working with the owner Dave on it. And we've expanded the business, and it's been wonderful. Like I come to work every day and I learn something every day, which is great. And I always want to do better and improve. So to me, it's a challenge because you have the autonomy to be able to affect a lot of change. So it makes it exciting for me.
I gotta tell you, it was very exciting when I found out you were purchasing Nissan there, because now it expanded my options as far am I going for a Ford GT? Am I gonna go for a Shelby? Maybe a GTR now? Is it a 270 which is
it's the 400Z now.
We're up to the 400Z, right?
400Z. We're stepping you up, buddy.
Yes. It's funny because when I was growing up, it was the 270, and those cars are just awesome. And it's funny, every company has its own distinct cars, and Ford and Nissan, apples and oranges, but it's cool that you can offer a breadth of product that way. I got to ask you, what's going through my mind right now is if you had not had that conversation about that potential job with Chrysler, first of all, when you were leaving the bank, what the heck were you thinking? Like, what was your game plan at this point? You didn't have anything lined up. What if you never had that conversation about Chrysler, and let's say that other job didn't pan through? What the heck were you planning to do?
Well, you know what? I have enough trust that God will put me down the right road. And ultimately, sometimes in life, things happen for a reason. Because I always thought, you know what? Great, I'll stay with the bank, stay with Moneris. I'd become a senior manager. I'd do my MBA, get them to sponsor me for it. Eventually, become a vice president, get a good retirement, and call it a day, right? But being able to see the other side of the coin in let's say running a business, because in effect that's what I do. I run 2 dealerships and the US part of it. It gives you a different outlook, and the corporate world is a different cat compared to this. I have way more fun doing this. Yes, there are more problems associated with it, but it gives you a little bit more excitement than saying, I'm the vice president of processing for North America or something along those lines, right? It's a different world. And yeah, what was I thinking? I just thought, at that point, let me take an opportunity, because it got to the point where when I was at that job, I didn't have the same support that I did from senior management, as they made a few changes and they moved out some really good people that were putting you on the fast track. I was on the fast track to become a senior manager there. I used to have meetings with some of the senior managers. We'd have coffee dates every week as part of a progression plan, which is great. I mean, a lot of my success in the car business has come from what I learned at school and also at Bank of Montreal and at Moneris. There are a lot of things that I learned there and how to organize and technology that I would not have done close to as good as I would have if I didn't have that strong base. So what I was thinking about expanding my life, because I figured that if I was going to be consulting on my own, I would have some freedoms that I could take the chance. At that time, my dad had just passed away, and a lot of things I needed to make changes. And I still had to make sure my mom was well taken care of. So there are things that I wanted to make changes to make sure that I was there for her. So that afforded me the ability to make sure she was okay, make sure that the house was taken care of because it was a pretty large house that we had, and it was just me and her then at that point. So it allowed me to help her get to the next stage, allowed me to get to the next stage. So there are a lot of reasons why it happened. And I don't look back. One thing I always tell people, I have this conversation with my wife regularly, is that I don't regret anything because there's a reason why it happened. You have to take the good out of it and learn what it is you need to learn out of it to understand why it happened. Because you can look back and regret lots of things in life, but what is it going to do for you? It's going to do absolutely nothing. It just makes you feel like, this pit in your stomach where like, oh geez, I didn't do this, I didn't take this opportunity. You know what? It happened for a reason. What did you learn from it? I learned from it. Next time I'm going to look at it this way. I'm going to look at it this way to allow me to make a better, well-informed decision, and to make the decisions that are going to propel you forward rather than backwards. Right? There's always a learning experience with it.
I gotta tell you, I remember one of my memories of real estate is I was a young boy. Let's say I was 11 maybe, and this person, was talking about real estate, and I'm listening in, right? And they're talking about this property and the property that they could have acquired 10 years before that. And they said, you have any idea how much this property is worth now? And they start bawling out their eyes, and the spill of regret is just flowing out of them. And I'm at 11 years old, and I'm saying to myself, I never want to be like that, ever, never, ever, because you can't turn back the hands of time. But remember that experience, and hopefully you'll make better decisions in the future. I'm reasoning like this at 11, okay? And some things just stick in your mind, And it's amazing now when you're talking about your story. And I always say, when you're hearing other people's stories, I could say that I started thinking about my own story. I'm sure the viewers right now, the millions and millions that are listening at home, think about their own stories. And I started to think to myself, wow, George and I are actually so much more similar than I even realized it, because the course of your life really came from one conversation almost in the car sense, I remember why I came to Kormans. I told you the story before, that there was a mediator that was renting space at a law firm that I was working at. And I mentioned to him on an offshoot, one time I saw him, I hadn't seen him in months, telling him I'm planning to go open up my own law firm one day, or I'm going to maybe join a law firm and eventually, grow a practice and take over, whatever I planned at the time. I relayed all this stuff to him. And as I was planning to go and start my own thing, I get a phone call from this guy, David Corman, saying, hey, we have a mutual friend. He said that we should speak. And I'm like, what? Really? And it was like literally at the last moment. And that one conversation I had led to this conversation. And I had spoken to like 20 plus different lawyers about their law firms, and nothing ever felt right. And I said, you know what? I can't deal with other people. I just want to do my own thing. And I got connected with the right person at the last second, and him and his cousin Jerry. And they're like the greatest gentleman I can ask for. He's the best partner. David's the best partner a man could ever ask for. And it's amazing how the universe kind of brought us together on one conversation. And that changed the total course of my life, his life. And it's pretty freaking cool.
It definitely is. It's funny. You have to be the right, they say it's the right time, right? So, it's the right time for it, but you also have to be the right person at the right time for it.
Like imagine we were doing our transaction together, and let's say you were ill, or I was ill, or another emergency came up for one of us and somebody else was handling it and we hadn't connected the way we had. Mm-hmm. If we don't have that one experience, we don't come together the way we do and form a lifelong friendship, brotherhood. It's unbelievable.
That is true. You're right. 100%.
So now I got to ask you a question, because it's always bugged me, and I'm going to use a very, very bad metaphor, but right now I'm binge watching Breaking Bad. Okay. You're familiar with the show?
Absolutely.
Very good.
You're so far behind. How come you only binge watching that now? That's like,
I'm busy closing deals for people like you that I don't get to go and enjoy myself and watch TV in my off time. No, just joking. Just joking. I now that people are saying, you really remind me of Better Call Saul, I don't know if that's a compliment anymore. I'm starting to get a little suspicious about that one.
Not too sure, buddy.
So let's take, for example, the people, I'm not endorsing this under any circumstances as a lawyer, obviously, but people go and open up a meth lab and, doing their meth thing, whatever, fine. But the person, Walter White, you go and start your meth thing. The one thing you're not doing is you're not going to use your own product, So that being said, in my horrible metaphor, you're a car guy. You said you love cars, general manager of a Ford Nissan dealership. Where the heck are the supercars, and where's the spilling out of cars? to me, when I watch you in action, I know you get that you love cars, but it's like a widget. Like you're selling widgets. You could be selling these cups for all I know. You're running a business like a business. It's not thought of as a super fan. It's thought of as a business first and foremost.
Absolutely, it's thought of a business first and foremost, because the thing is, you have to make sure you have the right processes and people in place to run it, regardless of what you're selling. Now, obviously, you have to love the product that you're selling. That's a golden rule. If you don't love what you're selling and you don't believe in it, then you shouldn't be selling it. Number one. Number two, again, yeah, you have to have the right people and processes, and you have to treat it like a business. You have to look at your return on investment. You have to look at making sure you're taking care of your people properly, because that goes an absolutely long way in making sure that your business is successful. And you have to make sure you're taking care of your customers as well too, because they're the people that will come back and buy, and you want to make sure you foster and keep those relationships going well too. So yeah, I may not have all the supercars, and I don't get me wrong, I love driving. Up to last week, I was driving a Shelby GT350, right? Took it home for the weekend, went to a car show with it. So I really enjoy doing that. But at the same time, I try not to get emotionally invested, because it can detract you from making sure you're taking care of the important parts of your business. Those things are just a fringe benefit in my eyes.
I gotta tell you, and no disrespect to other dealerships out there, but I was straight up with you. I didn't go looking for it and judging you as a friend. When I've been to Erinwood several times, and I gotta say, I've told you this on several occasions. I'm really impressed from the moment you walk in, the experience as far as how people treat you, depending on what you're there for, and it's very clear that everybody understands their role, the team cohesiveness, the way the facility's built out, state of the art. Like I was very shocked and blown away at the level of every part of the experience, from when I walk into what it looks like, to how the people act, to how you feel from till the time that you leave. None of this is a coincidence, is it?
No, I wouldn't say that it is. That it is. Definitely, when the building was being built, the owner Dave is a very active participant in the business, and he plays a pretty big role here. He's very big into charity. Um, Making sure that things are easy for customers is one of the things that we work on very hard, to make sure that we have a good reputation, and we've built that over the years as a as almost a marketing tool, but not a marketing tool, because you have to have a good reputation in this business if it's going to take you far. So there's a lot of thought that went into the way that we do things, and there are certain things that we're dead against. And I'll give you a specific example. So at our stores, there are obviously inventory shortages, right? You've seen it. You've come by here when you had your vehicle cleaned recently, and saw that, wow, normally our lot's completely full, and there's not a lot of cars on here. So what some dealers are doing is they're charging a market adjustment above MSRP. And that's something that we're dead against, because unless it's, a special car like a GT500, or something that potentially has special things to it, it's one thing that we make sure that we don't overcharge people for, because we understand the relationship that we want to foster for the future. So we try to do things as best as possible and as transparent as possible for people, and that's what you'll see here. We're very selective in the people that we have here. A lot of the employees at both stores have been there for a long time. Some of my sales guys have been here for over 18 years. I've been here myself for 16. So it's one thing that longevity in the car business is not well known, but our dealership, it is.
And I got to tell you, like Ford is, well, I may not be driving a Ford currently,
Yet.
I a lot yet. I a lot of the products I, part of the reason I've never test driven a Mustang is because I don't know if I could ever leave after I drive it. Like, I just love them. They're just, oh, I just love them. But, um, because there's so many exciting products, like you read about the Bronco and the relaunch of the Bronco, where the F-150 is, best-selling trucks. You read a lot of stories, especially in the States, about those giant markups that you're talking about. There's no inventory whatsoever. You got some of the hottest products going. There's dealerships that are getting Bronco centers. They're going to have giant spaces devoted to it. So one of my first thoughts is like, how do you not jump on this bandwagon? If everybody else is doing it, how do you guys not?
Well, don't get me wrong, it's tempting. It's tempting to say, hey, great, we're going to throw a $4,000 market adjustment on there, and you can get it. But when you think about things from a long-term perspective, and that's how we treat this business, we're not here just for the money now. We're here to make sure that we can run this business for many, many years to come and have people start here and continue to work here and support their families well. And we actually have quite a few people here that work and their kids work here now too. So the generations are taking over as well. So we want to be able to continue to run this business well into the future. It's not a short-term prospect. So if you take that and you extrapolate what an MSRP market adjustment would do. So let's imagine, Jonathan, you walk
Yes.
in and I say to you, I know you from nowhere, so I'm not going to give you any sort of special chosen lawyer prices. And I figure, you know what, you're a lawyer, you can afford the market adjustment, right? So I tack on an $8,000 adjustment to a Transit, let's say, for example, because they're hot, right? Amazon is buying them up like crazy. They need them for fulfilling all the orders that they're getting because many people are still shopping from home. It's a convenient thing. So I sell that to you. You decide as a business that you're going to finance it for 4 years, right? But in those
Right.
4 years, you put on like 300,000 kilometers on it, and you want to trade it in with 1 year left on your finance. So let's say you owe, let's say 14 grand, but the vehicle is worth 3 because of the kilometers and the abuse, right? So there's that $11,000 spread there, of which 8,000 was contributed by the dealership because of the market adjustment. So if you're going to be thinking about things from a longevity perspective, you don't want to create a hurdle for the future business that you could have, right? So this is how we think about it. I don't think it's necessarily ethical. Some people do it, you know what, to each their own if they want to run their business that way, but we have very strong feelings about making sure that we're fair.
It blows my mind in a lot of businesses, whether you're a restaurant, a grocery store, a lawyer, a car dealership, a barber, whoever it is. In my mind, you're one of two things. You're either seeing a customer as one-offs and let's just gouge and get whatever we can and move on to the next person. Don't care if we ever come back. Or I want to build relationships. And it saddens me how few businesses actually want to build relationships in this day and age. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to car dealerships and nobody's come and greeted me, how I've seen ads, I messaged out, nobody got back. It's like somebody is giving you, a lead. Leads are the most important thing in business. It should be treated like with gold, and yet people don't seem to care. It blows my mind. And then the ones that really want to build relationships, I think that's the exception to the rule. And those are the businesses that are going to end up thriving. So no matter how much competition you have out there, and there's so many of us doing everything, there's very few of us actually that believe in the client service, the customer experience of it, period.
Agreed. And that's what gives you the distinct advantage over people, right?
Yeah.
It really does, because let's face it, if, say, for example, yourself and myself didn't get along so well when we did our transaction with you, regardless of the conversation that we had on the phone.
Keeping in
previous
mind,
to
again,
that.
we were on opposing sides here.
Right. Um, we may never have gotten together and do it, but the way that things went, the relationship that we ended up fostering, the way that things were handled on our first transaction that we did with you as our lawyer, it just gave me the motivation to continue to do it. I send you an email, I would get an answer back quickly. I get phone calls back. I would get, updates as to what was happening, and I was getting it from you at the time. And even after that, when I've done some other transactions with your people there, they always kind of knew, like, listen, this, to make sure that that George is well taken care of, and everybody delivered. So it really does go a long way when you think about how the person feels. And I tell that to my guys here all the time. A person will always remember how you feel when you do a transaction, not always what you say. It goes a long way.
I think one of the rudest things in business is when somebody does act as an introducer, as a referral source, and they send you business and you don't say thank you. It blows my mind. I could tell you, let's say I know professionals that I'm not involved in their areas, whatever they're doing, whether it's law or it's whatever, whatever service they're offering or goods. And let's say 10 people end up working with them, and not one, they don't bother to pick up the phone, text message, email, whatever, messenger, just to write a one-liner. Hey, Barry messaged me, really appreciate it. I gotta tell you, if there's one thing I religiously do and I pride myself on, anybody that ever does an introduction for me, even if it's the 20th introduction, I send 20 thank yous. It is so important. Somebody going out of their way to act as your advertising source, your marketing source. I believe thank yous are really, really important, and manners are unfortunately not followed too much in our society, but they should be.
You're 100% right about that one. There's a lot of people out there that don't understand that etiquette. And I mean, maybe it's upbringing, maybe it's culture, I don't know, but it really does go a very long way. I had referred somebody to get something done a few months back, and the handoff went great. And just up to last week, I ran into the person that I referred the services to. I said, "Hey, what happened?" "Oh, it was all well taken care of." And it turns out that they got way better than they thought they were going to, but I never got a thank you. Right? And I was like, "Really? Think I'm going to refer you something again?"
One time I didn't say thank you, and the person called me out on it, and I said, I'm in the middle of conversing with them still. It's been a couple of days. I just want to make sure where we're at, and then I was going to let you know, because either they're going to go with me or not go with me. But I'm kind of have this superstitious thing. I just want to know sometimes, depending on where the stage is at. But again, you got to do it. It's people, like, if you're listening to this, whatever industry you're in, think about it now. Think people who did that for you. Always say a thank you. It doesn't mean that you have to send them a gift card or whatever. People just like to hear your voice or get a message back. But that being said, I could tell you some of my longest standing clients, and even referral sources for that matter, became loyal because they were disloyal at some point. They ended up going somewhere else for whatever reason. Maybe, we had 100 things together and one thing didn't go well for whatever reason. And you know what? Maybe it'll be me. I'm human. I'm not perfect. Even though people think I'm a robot, I am not. Mea culpa. That's the way it is. Or maybe somebody was like $10 cheaper. I don't know. But they had such a lousy experience that then they realize, wait a minute, all those phone calls, emails, I didn't get charged for that. They were always available. I think I had it pretty good, So some of I would say our best advocates for marketing are the professionals that are competing against us, give them a worse experience. And then they realize, wow, I had it really, really good. Because they always say the grass is greener on the other side. But sometimes people say, you know what? I just feel like a change, or I don't like his tone today, or I'm in a pissy mood, so I'm just going to go elsewhere for the heck of it. But when they come back, then they stay forever generally. So, and just be open to it. And the other thing I will say to that is, even if they do leave or they never even want business, always build that relationship. Not like, hey, you've never sent me anything, or why are you working with somebody else? I'll never utter those words. If we're cool and we have a relationship, I feel like it'll come full circle. That's my logic.
True. Grass may be greener, but the water bill is higher, right? There's always some cost to it.
So that being said, where the experience go, I gotta finish up on cars here, but I gotta ask you, one of the things that hit me, and it kind of had a cross thing on it, was Ford, Nissan, and because a lot of dealerships in the car business, correct me if I'm wrong, but they tend to build in their one mold. Like a Ford dealership will have several Ford dealerships, like Hyundai, same thing, for example. And then when they start branching out, you'll find this one group and they'll have, 7 different brands. All of a sudden, it becomes a whole empire with it. What was the logic to go from such a product? Like, does it compete against one another, or is it actually offering more of a breadth of product to your clients? What do you feel?
So, I mean, part of the reason that we decided to go with the Nissan store, because we were also looking at a Chrysler store at the same time. Part of the reason why we did that is that back in 2018, Ford decided they were not making any more cars.
Sedans.
Correct. Other than the Mustang, that was it. So that was the only thing. They got rid of the Fusion, they got rid of the Fiesta, they got rid of the Focus, and they were all very well selling lines. Like those lines sold very well, but they thought that their market share, people were going more towards trucks and SUVs. Not necessarily that they were wrong, but we found that we had a bunch of customers here. It made up 38% of our sales, cars. So of course, for us, we had to make quite a few adjustments in terms of trying to switch to selling more SUVs and trucks to pick up that business. So we did that successfully. However, we still had a complement of customers who wanted a car, who wanted a smaller car for their kids who are now driving. And this is part of the reason why we decided on the Nissan store, because when we started looking at it, we're like, well, let's take a look. They have cars. It gives us the opportunity to sell to our existing customers, so we have that relationship already built. So it's an easy transition. They had the Sentra was redesigned. They redesigned the Frontier. They redesigned the Pathfinder. They have an electric iteration coming to Aria. The Leaf is being redesigned. And I just actually literally went to a meeting 2 months ago where the stuff that's coming down from Nissan over the next 3 years is some crazy stuff. It's going to be some exciting cars. And then you also have the 400Z that's coming. So that's part of the reason why we decided to do it, because it added to the complement that we had here. Sure, if we had the opportunity to buy a Ford store now, we still will, because it's easy to keep within the brand because you understand the process well, but you don't have that offering where you're able to pick up that other part of the market. So that was the reason behind it. And Nissan's been pretty great to work with from a corporate level. I get lots of support. I fostered some good relationships there with the regional managers and our district managers and things like that. And we understand what it is to be a franchisee. You follow most of the rules and you fight back when you need to, but the majority of the time, if you're just wanting to run a successful business, they'll support you.
But George, that being said, man, like most people cannot, and even in your industry, cannot do what you're doing at one dealership. You were already, I've known you for long enough. Before Nissan came into the picture, you were already swamped out of your eyeballs. How the heck did you bring another dealership into the fold and essentially double your work, and you're still standing as far as doing what you're doing in your career-wise in the automotive, plus real estate, plus you have a family? How the heck are you doing that, man?
I just made some adjustments. That's the best way to say it, because I had to let go of some of the things that I did that were sales manager job, for example. And I had to take more of a bird's eye view of the businesses rather than working in the business. You have to work on the business a bit more. So I had to take some steps back. And a few key individuals here, I made some good hires into the organization that were able to complement and take on those roles. So it took that off my plate, which allows me to be able to do that more. And obviously, the more you do things, the better you're going to get at it. And it worked out pretty well for me so far. I actually feel less stressed now with the extra responsibility, because I have good people in place that are going to help move that forward on my direction. So
how important is your team at Ford and Nissan respectively, as far as the people you put into place? Could you be doing what you're doing essentially without your key players by your side?
No, of course not. Of course not. Because then you'd be taking on that onus. Because I've played so many roles in dealership, I have an innate understanding of those roles and know how to do them. So, a sales manager is sick, I can run desk deals. I can go downstairs and run them and talk to customers and sell a car. I can help out in the service wherever is possible, things like that. So having those key people to do that well gives me a reason not to have to worry about it. I don't have to double check on it anymore.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, I had this. It's funny how organically thoughts come to our minds, and I think of private episodes of The Chosen Life. Mohammed Faki was on, the president of Paramount Fine Foods, great restaurant brand, and he was saying that in his mind that the employee, your team members, are in fact more important than the customers. And his logic was, without having the good team in place and without making your employees a priority, then they cannot give the customer the best experience. Because if you make the customer the priority, but you don't give that respect to the employees to be able to give them the tools and etc., the customer inevitably will not get that good experience. What do you think of that?
I think there's some truth to what he's saying. However, ultimately, without the customers, you wouldn't have a place for people to work at. So it's almost like a chicken and egg kind of deal.
Yes.
I think it definitely does go both ways. I think they're both very, very important. But yes, you do definitely need your staff to be able to deliver a quality service that's going to continue to retain and or attract new customers. So there's that thing you have to struggle with all the time. It's very important to hire good people, and hire good people and pay them well. That's another side of it. There are lots of people out there who are totally underutilized and underpaid. But I mean, that's probably another podcast.
I could do a whole podcast on the fact that there is a talent drain right now.
Yeah.
And I've talked to leaders in all industries, not just in my profession, not just in your profession, but in general, it seems it's hard to find good talent, motivated, loyal. It is just amazing out there. It seems that a lot of people on the job market, they're saying, oh, there's no jobs, there's no jobs, no jobs. They don't want to work, but they want to get paid top dollar, and they have zero experience, and they maybe don't even have the knowledge. It blows my mind, because you and I come from a generation still relatively, where you come in, look, I don't have the experience, maybe I have some knowledge, I don't care what I'm making at this point, I'm going to bust my butt for you, and I'm going to build it up, and I'm going to show you. That was how I was brought up. That's how you were brought up. In the year 2022, that's not how they're being brought up at all.
Yeah.
Or not for the most part.
I agree with you 100%. And I see it when we interview some, new people, let's call it, like people we're trying to bring into the fold for certain positions. And yeah, there's definitely a big spectrum. But sometimes you'll find that one that you can work with that allows you to move that forward. And eventually most people are going to have to fall into line and be able to work hard, because then they're going to get overlooked all the time. So people are going to have to learn and make those adjustments in their life. But you're right. Intellectual capital is absolutely a huge, huge thing, because there are lots of people that have lots of knowledge in an organization, and sometimes losing them will put you a step backwards rather than putting you a step forwards, right? And getting the right person and getting that work ethic is very invaluable these days, because everybody thinks they could be a TikTok superstar and work 3 hours a day and make $10,000 a month. It's just not reality, right? Like I always tell people, like, great, you want to be a TikTok superstar, you got to recognize that in the beginning you're going to have to probably put in 80, 90, 100 hours a week branding yourself, right? Putting out good content, quality content that people are going to want to watch, building your audience. There's so many things, and you've done it with your podcast, right? It was something that you started,
slowly.
and you continue to build it. But the reality is, over time, the same way if you start a business, over time it's going to get easier, and it's going to look like you're working 4 hours a day, and it gets easy that way because of the fact that you've taken the time to foster that right process and build that good foundation. A lot of people don't understand that. They can't see that time frame in their minds.
Look at each of our respective. It's funny you're saying this, and people I've brought on from all walks of life on the show, it's following a constant theme as far as hard work, perseverance, putting it in. You have been in the car industry for how long?
16 years now.
16 years. And how long were you in the banking industry for?
11.
11. Okay. So we're combining those years also, because you're bringing a lot of that life and work experience, what you brought to the automotive industry, obviously. I'm coming up to my 20th year after being called to the bar. And podcasting, I've done it now. I'm coming up to a little past 6 months. It's funny because I did blogging before, and I built up an infrastructure that way. And it's funny though, it's not the same thing, but it kind of is. And when you have kind of the experience as far as reaching out to the public and how you're putting out content, maybe instead of written, it's spoken, as far as how you're doing social media, but there's a lot of the same formulas, but something was done. There is experience coming into it, certainly. And I can tell you, sitting at the just law itself, I was a year 10 and I was still spinning my wheels, but I said, keep your head down, keep learning as much as you can, soak up as a sponge. It'll come, it'll come, it'll come. And I kept telling myself this, but best story I'll tell you, you know what? I always answer a story with a story. How are you going to like this one? I had somebody once interview with me for an articling position, okay? Many moons ago. So the guy comes into my office, sits down, puts his feet up on my desk, looks at me like this, says to me, so tell me, how do I get your job? And I look at him, I said, you can start off by getting your effing feet off my desk before I cut them off. And I said, I don't know what jungle or where the heck you came from, but buddy, you need to learn some manners here, because you're never going to get a job with that kind of attitude. And I read him the right act. And then we kind of like laughed it off a bit. And I said, buddy, you got to smarten up, man, because I'm going to tell you the ABCs. You know what, George? Tell me if you agree or disagree. I tell people there's a very simple formula on how to get a job. I believe that if I go to interview for any job, I don't care what, I can't go be a brain surgeon, for example, but if it's something in my wheelhouse, I'm going to get it. Very simple. I come in, I say, look, this is who I am, and this is what I'm about. This is who you are as a company. This is who you are, Mr. Interviewer or Mrs. Interviewer. This is what you've done. This is what you're about. This is why we fit well together. And I would like to show you this. You know what? Bring me in for a day. Bring me for a week. Don't even pay me. I don't care. I'll show you what I'm about. And if you don't like it, you can kick me out at any point. But I want this job. I believe I'll be better than any candidate. No one is going to outwork me. I pick up things fast. I will try my best for you. I want this. I'm devoted. I'm here. This is the job I want. I think I'm going to get it. What do you think?
100%. 100%.
Not complicated, right?
If you took the time to learn about the person,
yeah.
You took the time to learn about the company, and you said, listen, these are the skills that I have, and this is how I can benefit you. And I'm going to give you some free time just so you can try me out. To me, it's a no-brainer.
Folks, you know where I learned this from, actually? This is how George met his wife to be. He came to her and said, honey, it's nice to meet you. This is who I am, and this is who you are. And this is why I think we would work well together and why I would serve your organization well. And she gave a second date, and here they are together, happily married after.
I thought that you were my wife to be, but that's okay.
That's another episode. Real estate.
No, actually, I met my wife through a friend.
We'll get to her in a moment. But in all seriousness, real estate. Again, anybody doing what you're doing at Ford would be up to their eyeballs. Then you're doing a second dealership and you got your family, and then deep into real estate. We touched upon it before. You're talking about real estate rangers, correct? You are the VP of Investor Relations.
Correct.
You talked about how you got into real estate, but my friend, that is beyond a full-time job as far as finding opportunities, as far as fixing them up, tenting them, flipping them. And there's one thing I could say with you and Eddie, you're very similar minded. What I was drawn to you guys, everything you touch, it feels like turns to gold. You guys just have the secret sauce. You get it. And I thought like it must have fallen from the sky, but no, you took the courses, you did the investigatory work. Like you are very, when it comes to cars and how you're buying and selling cars, you're buying and selling real estate, you're very, very logical. You're looking at everything. And did it come natural to you, or was it a lot of pain along the way?
No, I think I've always thought very logically. And one thing that I learned early on is never put emotion against it. Look at the numbers, look at the offerings, look at your process, make your decisions based on that, rather than saying, I feel some way. Because, you know, you could feel something really good and you got a gut feeling about something, but if the numbers don't support it, you really don't have that backup. Now, don't get me wrong, there's certain circumstances looking at, you know, various stocks that they've been able to affect moving, like GameStop and things like that was affected. And yes, people have gone along with it, but there was no logic there, right? So you know, for me, it was always about, let's not have emotion when you're doing it. It came pretty easily in terms of the way that my brain works, because my brain works in a process. So if you say to me, great, how do we need to do this? I start thinking a solution in my brain right away. It's like, I feel like it's almost like a flow chart that happens in my brain to see how everything is going. So it worked really well. So I was able to use my skills there. Then being VP of Investor Relations for Real Estate Rangers, I'm good with people. I can speak to people about anything. I can speak to them about a myriad of things, right? And it made it easy to be able to say to people, listen, we have this. This is what the project's going to do. Are you interested in investing? This is going to be the benefit to you, right? And we show them our past performance. The one thing, though, that I can say is that, you know, yes, Eddie and myself, we did go out and we learned the courses and we read lots of books on real estate. There were obviously trials and tribulations. I remember staying up till 5 a.m, and Eddie used to call me the slave driver. And it's like, let's get this done so that we hit our timelines, right? You got to push yourself sometimes too. And you got to get outside of your comfort zone in terms of saying, great, I'm going to be sitting in this bathroom pit, rebuilding a bathroom because the floor caved in and nobody wants to touch a property because they're scared of the way it looks. And we kind of tried to educate ourselves on that. And then also we tried to build a really good team. So part of what we did was interviewing property managers. to see who was a good fit for us and who would be a good fit for the tenants, as we had taken those properties and moved them into, an active business stage. So that was one thing. We met with several real estate agents. So originally we started buying it up north in Barrie and Aurelia, right? Because the one property that you were opposing counsel on was one of our properties off of Dunlop Street that you helped us, that you helped the buyer with, right?
I can't confirm or deny that, but you can say it, sure.
Yes. So we were really big into that market as it was growing, but we went out there and we met with real estate agents, and we would say, great, hey, you know what? Tell us your experience in multifamily and investment. And I can tell you this, there were not a lot of agents out there that understood metrics and net operating income and how your cap rate affected a multifamily property and commercial properties. A lot of them didn't have that understanding about force appreciation and all those other factors that came into line. But a big part of it was building that team. So we found good real estate agents, we found good property management that we had a good relationship with, and it was symbiotic because as they started to do things for us, we helped them improve their process, and they helped us improve our process. And then as a result of that, I always spoke to prospective landlords that they were approaching for new business, and I would tell them about our experience with them, and it allowed them to get more business. So they took really good care of us because there was that exchange and there was that reciprocity that happened, right? So it made that part easy. And one of the things I think that made us successful in doing what we did is that the car business, typically is closed on a Sunday. So Eddie and myself would call each other up on Friday night and say, okay, let's go driving for dollars. This is what we used to call it, driving for dollars.
Driving for dollars. Love
so
it.
I'd say, okay, I'm off this Sunday. Let's drive up to Aurelia and let's go knock on doors. So literally we would drive and we would go look at some properties and we'd say, okay, great, let's find the ugliest house on the nicest street, right? And we go knock on the door. You guys tenants? Are you the owner? And we'd ask them questions like, how's your tenant? How old are they? How old is the landlord? Are they looking to sell? And we get numbers from them. And it was kind of funny because it was probably like our third or fourth time doing it, because we do it religiously, probably 2 Sundays a month. And there was this older gentleman that we pulled up, and we saw him sweeping the driveway. So I walked up to him and I introduced myself and I said to him, are you a tenant here? He says, no, actually, I own the place. I'm like, whoa, this is great, because normally you're running into tenants all the time and you got to get the numbers from them, right? And we started chatting with him, and he said, you know what? I own quite a few more properties around here. And he's 84 years old at the time, actually, ironically, right? He says, let me take you inside and let me show you a few of them. So we went into the one property. He was a carpenter by trade. He did beautiful work inside the place. His properties were well maintained. He had rounded edges instead of square edges for his walls. Like he cared about making sure he had a quality product. And he says, let me get in the car. Let me show you the other one. So we drove around and we looked at another 6 or 7 properties. So after that, Eddie, the way his brain works automatically is mathematics. Let's go back and let's run it through the meat grinder. So he created this whole spreadsheet. It was called a meat grinder, we call it. And it would take in, appreciation over time. It would take into account any sort of things that we'd have to spend money on to force appreciate the property to the level that we needed to raise the tenant profile and things like that. And he ran it through. And he's like, oh, let's go back up and let's meet with the gentleman named Bill, right? So we went back up several times and we met with Bill numerous times, like probably a dozen times. And we finally bought all of Bill's properties from them 2 years ago when he was 91 years old. We chased him down for 7 years. And the funny thing is he's still alive. So he's 96 now. And he is one of our tenants because he continued to live in this place that we bought from him. So it's kind of interesting how that worked and having those relationships with people, and just going out and finding out information and putting yourself out there made a big difference to saying, great, we didn't acquire these 17 doors by chance. We worked towards it. And even other things, when we're doing work on properties, the way we treated the plumbers and the guys that worked for us automatically got us referrals. So we're good friends with one of the gentlemen in Aurelia as well, too. And we ended up purchasing 4 of his properties through the plumber because his family didn't want to continue. His daughters didn't want to continue the real estate business. He wanted to retire. And we ended up buying some of his properties. So it was those relationships that we forged that allowed us to move forward. And I wouldn't necessarily say it came in an easy way, but it comes naturally because of all the things that you do ahead of time to prepare yourself for the success. You got to put in the groundwork, right? It's just like a house. You got to have a good foundation before you get to the top, right? So that was what we utilized there. And, Eddie's strong command of the metrics and market conditions and looking forward allowed us to make very sound decisions on properties, right? We got into the US and we bought properties there when the market had bottomed out a bit. And we were very successful with those. It's a different kettle of fish, so we had to take the time to learn that process. You got to get acquainted with it first. Get your feet wet that way. Learn about it that way. Learn as much as you can about it before getting into it, because it'll help you, kind of bypass some of those pitfalls that everybody falls into.
As you're saying, so many thoughts are going through my mind, and I'm gonna give you the three top ones that popped in my head as you told me. And I love that, driving for dollars, by the way. That's amazing. Uh, Number one, Eddie, I love him, but he frustrates me because it has to make the dollar sense. I've talked to him before, and we're talking about opportunities in general, and he's like, no, it doesn't work. And I'm like, Eddie, I'm telling you, man, this thing's gonna hit for sure. It makes sense. He's like, nope, I ran it through the numbers, not good enough. He has this thing and he goes, he's like that guy, at the roulette wheel, and he's got the system, and you gotta follow the system to win. And as soon as I've seen those guys, they're winning for 2 hours, they deviate from the system once, and they lose it all. You gotta stick to the system. I get that. So that's point number one. Number two, and we kind of touch upon it, but it's kind of funny. We were supposed to come together originally, and I was supposed to actually be your lawyer because everybody introduces everybody. So your realtor at the time, Nazir Manji, I was also looking after him and his clients. So Nazir actually said to you guys, turns out afterwards, I got the lawyer for you. And you guys like, no, I already have my lawyer. That's fine. But we should have been together anyways. So
Everything
again,
in its proper time, my friend.
everything happens the way it comes together. It's absolutely nuts. Point number three, and I believe that you'll agree with this one as well. I can tell you, having been a lawyer now, for close to 20 years, dealing with many different types of clients in the real estate corporate world, I could say one thing, and I tell people this all the time, especially those kids in their 20s and then young adults as they're rising up professionals in their early 30s. I could say this much: if you really want to be uber wealthy at the end of the day, the people that I know that have done really, really well, they have one thing in common. They own a lot of real estate. It just seems to be a common thing that people that get it put it together a portfolio over time. I always talk about the example of the Portuguese Italian bricklayer who came to Canada in the 50s and 60s. They're working through in the 70s, and they're acquiring one property at a time. They don't spend, on crazy things. They're very frugal. And then as they're 90 something, people look at them and like, doesn't look like they have a pot to, what in. And turns out they got 10 properties mortgage free. Sounds pretty smart to me.
It does. And I mean, listen, a lot goes, there's a lot that you can say about people that are frugal in a certain way because it helps them benefit for the future. So having that understanding of how to build makes a big difference. So you have to have a lot of respect for, you talk about the Portuguese or Italian bricklayer, and they're probably not making as much as, let's say, an executive, right? But they save their dollars. They try their best to make sure that they're spending it on something that will give them a return, right? Rather than saying, great, you know what, I'm just going to go buy this Gucci purse and handbag and slides and utilizing the money for things that are not going to give you that return. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with spoiling yourself, because as someone who's going to be successful with their finances, you have to set aside some money to treat yourself to something, because it can't always be all work, no play, because then you get burnt out. Right.
And there's a psychologist that have said in studies that you will not have the incentive to work hard and want to grow because you've given yourself no incentive. So there is a thing about work reward. Absolutely.
Yep. I mean, one of the books that I've read several times is Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. Recommend that to everybody. He talks about a system. Again, we talk about systems again, right? Always a system on how you take yourself to make yourself financially free. right? He talks about setting up various bank accounts, and part of it is you take your earnings, and a portion of it goes to savings, a portion of it goes to charity, a portion of it goes to just blowing it. So he says, look, you know what, if you want to go and have a $400 bottle of champagne because that's what you like, you do it because you've earned it, right? But make sure that all your other pots are well taken care of so that you can continue to bring your life forward. So that's one thing. You definitely have to have the system in place. And one thing about real estate, though, that I will caution people is that Eddie is right. You don't want to overpay for something now because it's going to take you a fair bit of time to right that wrong, right? One of the key things about investing in real estate is making sure the metrics make sense. Sure, don't get me wrong. A lot of people buy, new construction because there's going to be an upside to that. The way that immigration is happening and the way the housing market has been going previous to the little dips now, there's definitely a benefit, and there's several ways to skin a cat. But the tried and true way is to make sure you run your metrics, you don't get emotionally involved, and you make the decisions based on that, and don't overpay for it because you won't have to dig yourself out of the hole. You always want to make sure you have a backdoor in anything you do. You come back to the car business, for example. I talk to my used car manager and say, great, if we're going to buy a car for our stock, we always have to have an exit plan. It's the same thing with buying a property. Eddie and myself always used to sit down and say, great, here's the exit plan. And this is what we'd say to investors. This property, we expect it to earn this much. And when it hits this amount, we're going to exit. We want to give people the understanding that there is an end to it, because it doesn't allow people to feel that they've earned anything from it, just sitting on a property for years and years and years. So, I mean, for us, and someone, if you use the Portuguese bricklayer, for example, right? Their end result is that they're going to have a very comfortable retirement with 10 paid off properties that they don't have to worry. Their family's going to have that generational wealth at that point. You've passed it on. That's your motivation, right? It goes a really, really long way.
I one of the topics I wanted to bring up that was related, but I kind of stepping back for a second, and what we're discussing here was the thoughts on, everybody always asks me, well, how's the real estate market doing? What do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen in interest rates? But I want to step back for a second, because there's two kinds of people in my mind, and this is again overgeneralization, but regardless of what's going on in the market and interest rates, etc., I think people have to step back and look at their situation and seeing where you're at in life. The reason I say that is, I give the example. You have two doctors, two lawyers, for example, both very successful, making hundreds of thousands in income each. And I've had them as clients, and you think that these people are, beyond well off with savings, etc. And yet they come to refinance their house, and guess what happens? They're rolling a whole bunch of debt into their property. The average Canadian, they say, has 8 credit cards or something like that, but they have car payments, lines of credits, credit cards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you go and your house has gone up, let's say over the last 5 years, it's gone up 300,000, let's say, you're like, wow, that's amazing. And then all of a sudden turns out you have another 200,000 in debt that you've accumulated since your last mortgage. One group of person that has this debt say, okay, so my house has gone up, I'm going to go refinance it now, and then I'll be able to pull that debt into one area at a much lower interest rate and a lower payment. I'm the smartest person in the world. Versus the person that goes and buys a property, lives frugally. Some of them go and live in their basement even and rent the upstairs, or they live upstairs, rent the basement, maybe, or they just have the whole house, but their property's gone up by that same amount. And then they're saying, you know what, I'm going to refinance it, and I'm going to use this money as my seed money towards buying my next property. And I'm going to run my metrics. And with the mortgage I'm going to have on that one, plus here, and the rent I'm going to get and carrying the cost, I'll break even, or I'm going to make a little bit of money every month. But now I own a second property. That to me is called building wealth, regardless of the market.
100%. And I think you recognize there's good debt and there's bad debt. So if you're going to say, great, you know what, I'm going to refinance my house because I have $50,000 in credit card debt that I've amassed on vacations and all of these fancy things. And then you're going to take that $50,000 and I'm going to extend my amortization period another 5 years. So it's a nice, clean monthly payment for me. You've taken that good money and put it against a bad thing, right?
Amen.
But definitely you take that, you put that into a couple of real estate projects. and you look at the ROI correctly, and you run your metrics and you follow the process, and yes, it may cost you a couple $100 every single month, but what's going to happen is that you're going to profit from those ones in the future in a big way, because when they're paid off, and it's been paid off with the sweat of the first house, and then that one's paid off as well too, you're laughing. You have so many options at that point.
And passive income, it's incredible. I had a mentor at a younger stage that used to preach to the various professionals, and he said, if you can't pay your credit card every month, then you ain't using it. That's just the way it's going to be. You're going to go shop at a cheaper grocery store. You're going to go to less restaurants. You're going to forego the vacation this year. Maybe not change your car for the 1 year. Whatever it's got to be, it's got to make sense. And he said, if you're ever going to over leverage yourself on one thing, it's going to be on the house, on the property. Now, not overpaying it, but if you have to squeeze out and I don't know if I can afford this, but I need it for my family, or I think I'll need the extra size, go a little more rather than less. If you have to tighten yourself, rather than getting the smaller property, but then blowing it all on credit cards.
Agreed. 100%.
So that being said, George, in this day and age, where are you seeing the market at? How are you feeling about it as a real estate investor owner?
It's kind of scary a little bit, just because when you look at it from a payment perspective and interest rates going up, you recognize it's going to stifle some investment, right? But for the people who are hanging on to cash and stuff like that, it's probably a really good time to look at it, because the property values are going to drop a certain percentage, and you'll be able to capitalize on those if you have available cash, and it'll turn out to be a good investment because you're going to be carrying less debt. And the reality is that real estate's cyclical. We're going to pass this. Interest rates are not going to continue to go up as much as people will think that they will. It's not going to be in the 1980s where you got an 18% rate, 14 to 18% rate. That would be reason to commit treason against the government, right? If it got to that point, because then people
we don't have that reason already,
people wouldn't be able to live, right? Yeah. But realistically, it may not be a bad time to invest, provided that you can follow a process that allows you to carry that property properly, and you have enough cash down to allow that to happen. It's important that you have that. They have all these courses that they talk about where, $5,000 down and get this money from your uncle and use that for the cash down. But you're then at that point at the mercy of those people. So, anytime Eddie and myself did a property, we always used to have something saying, listen, I'm going to put down 30% on these properties, because we want to make sure that we're hedging ourselves against risk. So it could be interest rate risk if the interest rate goes up. It could be, approval risk, because, 20% may not be enough for a multifamily property. And we always tried to make sure that we had some sort of inherent equity built in, so it made it comfortable for you. I think that's one thing that's important. There's nothing wrong with discomfort if you know it's going to pay off, but you got to be prepared for all the pitfalls that are going to happen during that time. And, if it means that, you got to eat tuna for a whole month to make that happen, you do it if you're willing to make those sacrifices. The thing is, many people these days are very accustomed to comfort, right? Many people in North America are very accustomed to comfort, right? We're in a Netflix society. People get everything now. You want to watch a show? You want to binge watch Breaking Bad like you can watch it right now. You get everything you want almost immediately. Uber Eats. Uber comes and picks you up if you want to go somewhere. There's so many things that we're in a Netflix society that it's very hard for people to acclimatize to a disciplined and structured role to be able to invest effectively. You just got to get that process down right and understand that you're making those sacrifices for the future.
George, as the wise person once said, we are living in a material world, and I am a material girl. So that's just the way it is, buddy.
That's right. I'll get you a cone bra for that one.
It worked for her. I don't know if it'll work for you as well. One of the final thoughts I want to bring in is talking about times, and when times are quote unquote scary and everything else. It blows my mind watching this for all the years I've been on the earth. Stock market, real estate market, for example, how similar they are. When everybody's buying, everybody wants in at any price. And then when everybody's dumping and prices are going down, nobody wants to be in. I've been told by many, many professionals, the smart people are the ones sitting on the bags of money. And then when nobody is buying and everything else, that's when they're scooping up the stocks. That's when they're scooping up the real estate. Have you heard that one before?
I definitely have, and I kind of alluded to it there just now as
Yes,
well.
you
Like
did.
if you got money right now, it'd probably be a good time to purchase an investment property, because you're going to have some people who are going to want out, that are probably a little desperate because they can't afford that $300 biweekly. They're not cash flowing the way they want it to be, and you can turn that in and leverage that into an opportunity. So I 100% agree with that. Um, stocks are one of those things that people do panic. There's no doubt that people panic and say, well, geez, it dropped this amount. Sometimes the best thing to do is stop. If you don't have the money, stop and write it out, and it'll come back up. But if you do have the money, dollar cost averaging, you throw that money back in, and when it goes back up, you're going to make up more than what you've lost. So the same thing goes for the real estate market, stock market, car market. They're all very cyclical, right? In the car market, for example, leasing is a very popular thing. Remember, Ford got rid of leasing in 2009 because the economical forecast for the next 3 years was not making it conducive to lease vehicles. And there's still some places that don't do it, but it's a very good tool for people from an economic perspective to be able to drive something at a cheaper payment, right? But it's all cyclical. Leasing came back in full force. Leasing is very popular now after it took a hiatus for 3 years. Stock market, real estate market, car market, all the same stuff. It's all cyclical. We got to learn from the past to remember what you're going to be facing in the future again, because it's going to come back around.
In all three of those markets, though, when the things are hot, people want them at any price. Watch market, same thing. Rolex, this Rolex retails at 12,000. I'll pay 25,000. That's what the market's going. Blows my mind. So when it's hot, I'll pay any money. But then as things start to cool down, people are like, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off. I think it'll go down lower. I'll go down lower. And then it's all that gamble. And the truth is, the other day, none of us can look at a crystal ball and say when it's going to bottom out, because we'd all be in Tahiti right now. We could tell you that. But the way I see it, if you're going to go buy a house, let's say 1.7 million, and you're kind of holding off a bit, things cool down. And all of a sudden, you know what? There's no longer bully offers, multiple bids. I can go put in my conditions, put an offer properly. And now I could scoop it up at 1.4. I think I'm pretty happy with that versus saying maybe it'll go to 1.2. Maybe it'll go to 900. People I find they get very greedy, and during those slower periods, and I'm in my mind, jump in, you ready for it, because it's funny because you're going to wait a little more. If it's going to go back, now you're going to say, I could have had it at this price, and you're going to play that game.
That's the whole regret thing, right? People think, well, I could wait a little bit longer. It might go this direction, but nothing's guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed. But realistically, using your example, 1.7 to 1.4, I mean, it hit 1.7 before, it will again. So right now you're buying it at a discount technically.
Especially for those people that are buying and planning to, in the future, if they're going to buy another property, they're going to sell their current property. I tell them, look, in the future, you buy, let's say 1.4, and whatever happens in 10 years from now, guess what? If it does dip, whatever you're going to go buy is probably something more expensive, which is going to dip more percentage wise. So you're still ahead at the end of the day if you buy and sell in the same market. So just business logic, business sense, think it through, crunch those numbers.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts out there for those car buyers, for those real estate investors out there that are saying, what's going to happen as car supplies coming back, are real estate supplies coming back? What are your general thoughts on these two markets?
Well, I mean, car supply for sure, it's starting to come back. I mean, up to today, we had probably 30 vehicles dropped off that were kind of stuck in production due to part shortages and chip shortages and things like that. So you're starting to see that getting a little bit of a revival. In my opinion, and looking at everything that I've spoken to the various manufacturers and a lot of people in the industry, it probably won't be till the latter half of the year, like last quarter of the year, that you're going to see a marked improvement in the amount of inventory that's coming in and the availability to have stock units. So that's one thing that you'll notice that'll probably start to happen, but it won't be full force the way it used to be until maybe sometime next year. And in my opinion, I think that a lot of manufacturers have learned how to run more efficiently. So when I look at running the dealership, we used to have, as high as 1,100 cars in stock at one time. And realistically, we don't need that. We've found a way where you can have a good balance between factory ordering vehicles for customers who don't need them immediately and selling out of stock for the ones that do need it immediately, and try to get away from that, whole immediate gratification thing. So there's going to be an adjustment in the way that inventory levels are across the car market, because you won't need that crazy amount of inventory anymore, because you can run your business a lot more effectively and efficiently and save yourself a lot of money and interest and things like that carrying that amount of inventory. So you will notice that's going to happen across the car market, in my opinion. I may be wrong, but I don't think so, because a lot of the manufacturers are really kind of saying, hey, maybe you don't need that amount of inventory. So that's the one thing. Real estate inventory, obviously right now you're going to have less demand than supply, because a lot of people are a little scared, and I understand. Sorry, my lights just went off. I understand that in a lot of transactions that are closing now, because the property values have dropped down, a lot of people want to renege on the contract. It's unfortunate. However, looking at that supply, Canada's opening back up immigration. Immigration is definitely coming back. Up to today, I got a couple emails from people who are coming to Canada and they're looking for jobs, which is a wonderful thing, because you always want to give people an opportunity to go down the same path that I did, right? So you're going to find that that's going to help stabilize the real estate market, because they got to come here. They're going to have to accept the real estate rates, and a lot of people that are let into Canada at this point are fairly financially viable, so they're going to be able to contribute in that respect. And Canada is bringing in a lot of highly skilled people too. So we're going to benefit from that immigration. It's going to help stabilize the real estate market and supply issues. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, but I would still continue to invest in real estate. I'm actually, I just bought a pre-construction last year, because I recognize that it's going to be growing in those areas. And I'm working on a couple other projects outside of the country at the moment because of the popularity there. And I don't think you should ever stop investing. Just check your metrics and make sure that you can support it all.
Well, George, if you need those agreements reviewed and closings to happen, please Google Jonathan Chosen Lawyer, and I'm sure he'll be very happy with his team to assist you in your real estate and corporate needs.
I'm sure he will.
Thank you so much, George, for taking the time today. It's a wonderful conversation when we know we scheduled for an hour, and an hour and a half flies by in a moment's notice. That goes to show the level of friendship and conversation. You're a highly intelligent guy, very personable, approachable. I got to say, you've been a tremendous friend and mentor to me, and really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For people that do want to reach you as far as questions on cars, real estate, best way to reach you?
If you want to look me up on at erinwoodford.com or directnissan.ca, my contact information is on there if you have any questions about cars, real estate. Our website is actually down right now for Real Estate Rangers, but if you go to LinkedIn, you'll find me on there as well too.
Look for George Hill. If you find NBA glory, seasoned veteran playing with Giannis, you've reached the wrong George Hill. Trust me, I made that mistake once. George, I know we didn't meet in the bathroom for the first time, but I'm glad the universe did bring us together. So again, thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll have you back. Your partner in crime from the Three Amigos. I'm working very hard in getting him on, because he has quite the story as far as his connection to the whole Chosen Lawyer brand and all that. He was actually the one who took the picture originally that ended up on the t-shirts and mugs that you see. So we're going to have him on for that story, but he's a very busy man. So we'll continue to diligently work with his team to try to find a scheduling time for Mr. Eddie B.
Wicked. It'll be an awesome time when you have him on there.
Yeah, he'll have the stories guaranteed. So as we're signing off, we pull up the pipes.
But my pipes are not like yours, man.
Oh yeah,
they're not like yours.
And we say,
I'm getting old.
Keep living the chosen life.